Hi there, I'm taking this opportunity to record what I've done on the first impulse of in the first turn of a game of the Second World War Pacific Theatre map scenario. Now I've posted a kind of a quick sort of overview of my initial thoughts on the game, and I find it an extremely enjoyable game to play. It's you have to spend a fair bit of work to kind of cross-reference the rule book because it has no cross-referencing within it, and that is essential in the game. Although it's a very simple game system, it has very many parts because we're talking about strategic. In this case, just the Pacific theatre. You can imagine you've got boats, you've got planes, you've got economies, you've got production, and all these parts interrelate to each other, but not through cross-referencing the rulebook. But anyway, so I'm in no way an expert. I've played a training game many moons ago. Then a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I played another training game, which was essentially sort of 2 or 3 seasons. Then I restarted. I thought I was playing a proper game, and then after watching another YouTuber's, I think it's Chris Evans, he's concurrently playing the European theatre of this game. He posted a video in it, and also me posting some questions on Board Game Geek. Those two combined made me look more closely at what I was doing, noticing that I had made quite a few mistakes. More specifically, my questions that pointed out some of my mistakes, assumptions I'd made that were not true. And I think it is Chris Evans. Chris Evans' video, I believe that's his name, showed me that maybe there's I generally sort of move into games in quite a gung-ho fashion, just sort of get playing, and he seems to be a lot more of the sort of careful, methodic, thoughtful style. I'm not saying he's not kind of dramatic and so forth. I don't know the guy, but so he had noticed certain things in the game that weren't quite right, and had in the East and Western theatre at least, and so things such as, I think you could kind of break the game with the way the economics was working. You could just make it impossible for I can't remember exactly, but I think it was something like the Germans could ruin the British economy right from the start, in a very unrealistic fashion. So I'm going more slowly now to try and look at things like this, possible overlooked things in the development and production of the game, specifically in Pacific Theatre. I haven't seen anything else on the Pacific Theatre of this game yet, so I'm trying to find if there's strange anomalies that throw it out of whack. That's kind of at the back of my mind, but at the forefront then is just enjoying how these systems work and what you can do, and how it feels kind of fairly tight to the reality of the campaign as I know it. So right here I'm just going to show you, this is the first impulse of the game in this theatre. It's a Japanese impulse. We're 1941, but we're in spring, so Pearl Harbor would happen in December, so we've got a couple of seasons before that goes on. So essentially the Japs are preparing. Now they can attack China once each season without the US entering the war. If they attack anyone else apart from Vichy French possession, the US will enter the war. So they're quite limited in what they can do. And I'll just go over and show you what they have done. Essentially, I think I'd like to start. The Japanese have spent all their resources, and they've used up all their reinforcement possibility for this. Reinforcements for the season, the resources for this impulse. Now, you have to think about this because they will regenerate. In fact, we have finished. So they've spent. They start with 7 resources, and they've spent 7. Now, what I hadn't done is at the end of the impulse, they should have regenerated, and they will regenerate 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So they've only got 4 for their next impulse. However, I think it's worth it because one thing you do with resources is bring on reinforcements. And so they are bringing on their reinforcements as fast as they can so that they have more for later. So essentially what they did there is they reinforced with a couple of CVs here. These CVs started the game there in Japan. I placed them there. You can choose where in Japan they started. I put them there, and essentially those are the two CVs together. I'm going to have a 4 CV force, which will do the Pearl Harbor raid. And speaking of which, over here they sent out 2 submarines. So the Japanese spent 2 resources on those reinforcements, and the rest of the 5 they spent on action points, which means every resource spent at the moment, because we have a monsoon, they will get 4 action points. They had 20 action points in which to do stuff. So 2 were to do that. So those submarines are intended there to start blocking supply, because the US has units start in the United States, and they can build and deploy in the United States. And as soon as they enter the war, they'll start trying to move them this way. So we're hoping to block the lines of supply, meaning that it will be difficult for them to build up here. So for that similar reason, we have a task force. This ends the turn at sea. There's a destroyer and a battleship there. The destroyer is intended to assist, because destroyers are better against subs. So the US, they have a sub in the Philippines, they have infantry unit and land-based air, but they can also build subs here and deploy them and bring them out. So that destroyer is supposed to help against any American subs. Then they have from Truk, there's a headquarters, and they sent out those 2 this way, and here they're one and only marine unit and a battleship, and it could only get this far, but in their next impulse they will attack New Caledonia. And this is an errata. The other games I've been playing, it's actually it was marked as a Commonwealth possession. It's actually French, and at this point in the war it's Vichy French, so they can take that and the US will do nothing about it. That's going to give them a port over here in the sea. That means that they can plop 4 ships and or submarine units in there, so they can store on a base there. Otherwise, on normal like 1 hex islands, you see there's a port there, because a star is a capital, is also a port. These ones and these ones here, they can only have 1 submarine and or ship. So you can see we've got 1 battleship there. So normal islands, single islands can only take 1. So that's going to greatly assist the Japanese for operations around in this area, and perhaps even indicate threat to Australia. If in fact I think if the Japanese take Australia and India, then they are considered to have either knocked the Commonwealth out or won this scenario. But that's quite a tall order. It will not be easy to take India, because supply lines is probably similar to Australia. I don't know. I haven't really thought about trying that. So they've done those, and also, as you saw here, these moved out. So essentially they sea transported infantry units. There's one there with the battleship escort. So they came out from Japan. Then this, I can't remember what I did with that unit. I think you might have actually, I'll have to check my reinforcements limits. I might have overdone the reinforcements, but I think he moved. I'd originally set him up here to here. Similarly, we had a long-range bomber, a land-based air, moving out to there, Taipei, and another one moving out to here. And these are all prepared, because they're long range, they have 3 hex range, so they're prepared to assist in the invasion of the Philippines. Likewise, same here, here, and here. So this is with some experience now that I'm preparing invasion, this kind of thing. You also have this task force at sea. It's just a battleship that is intended to interdict any movements of the Commonwealth or British, as they're marked here, because these are British, these are Commonwealth, but they're Australian. So these battleship there, Commonwealth Brits also have a battleship and a CV there. So, but they are not at war with Japan at the moment. So, if they do declare war, okay. But at the moment, I think that battleship will be enough. And then similarly, they have another task force here. I'll mark that with a red dot because that tells me it's Japanese. So here, so they have battleship, destroyer, that destroys to protect against the submarine there, or at least attempt that, and 2 infantry, and that should be mark that ST, so it's sea transporting. So they're using the maximum of 3 sea transports can be in use at any one time. So 2 there and 1 there in preparation here for the raid on Manila. Then I actually set up here with 2 infantry, 3 infantry, and I set up with 2 land-based bombers. That's not legal. I should put 1 there because you can only have 1 a hex. And essentially the infantry are all there, so that as soon as Japan starts, I think this will start by declaring war against the US, then the US will join the Commonwealth. They will be automatic allies, and Japan can move into Rangoon and Thailand with those infantry units. In fact, I should probably set one up here, which would have been wise, but never mind. It's also a possible threat here, because Japan can attack nationalist China or Maoist China once per season without worrying any of the other powers and making the US enter the war. So those are there for this, taking, and also to move in on nationalist China. And the last thing we did was we did a massive attack. So you've got 2 infantry there, 2 infantry there, land-based there, and also Manchuria. They have to stay there, these Manchurian units in Manchuria, likewise the Korean unit. But this is 1, 2, 3, just close enough that this could assist. And so there was a massive attack with all those units on Maoist China, which succeeded in inflicting 2 losses for 1 loss, which was promptly resupplied with an action point, so sort of healed, as it were. And I think that is it. So Japan can do a lot before anyone else can really do anything. So you can see they're setting the stage in preparation. I really like this part, particularly of Pacific theatre, because of this, the kind of the ocean's expanse. I find it very interesting the way you can sort of plan your routes. It's very different from, for example, Operation Barbarossa, where you kind of more or less have lines facing each other, and so you're performing sort of making thrusts out with your elastic band, where it pulls in one direction, it pinches in another. Here, they'll be more interleaved, so the Americans will be moving through the Japanese through the Americans, and so forth. So that's the Japanese player. Now, I feel I might have made one mistake. I'd have to check the reinforcements. If I've brought out 1 or 2 more than I should have, which would give the Japanese some resources back, but also, according to the rules, when a unit attacks, it's what they call acts of acted, and so it can't do anything else. It can't move or fire again. But you can also flip a supplied or ground air unit back to its ready side as long as it's not in an enemy zone of control. And that costs an action point, but it doesn't mark the unit as acted. So according to my interpretation, an acted unit can have that done to it, but I'm not sure that's how other people would read it or take it. And it's one of those things where I think it just depends on the background of your mind, whether you think it's one way or the other way. It's not that I can find spelled out specifically in the rulebook. If I'm wrong, please tell me. So that's it. So the next current player is the Commonwealth. Did the Commonwealth have a flag of its own? I should look into that. I don't believe it did it? Because it was a Commonwealth. It wasn't an overarching empire, as it were. Yes, okay. It might have been more indeed than word, but at this point it was. So I guess each nation had their own independent flags. But so to represent the Commonwealth as a single body, they use the British flag. But it's interesting what if there's another option. So they will go next, and not being at war, there's not a lot they can do. They could start deploying. Essentially, they will spend their resources, and they can deploy 2 of those reinforcements. And then the US will do the same kind of thing. So I think that's enough for now. Just a quick bite of what's going on and a look at the Pacific Theatre opening for the Japanese in the Pacific Theatre scenario, the Second World War.